We're going to do part two of religion influenced slavery, and we're going to kind of, this is like the, you know, kind of put a cap on, no, I wouldn't say a cap, but we're going to finish this chapter um, and see if we can go a little deeper into how they treated this, African people during slavery, and why slavery is different from other races, like Caucasian slavery versus Chinese slavery versus how Indian slave was, and also versus how the other Aboriginal people slave was compared to African slave. African slavery was deliberately focused on a group of people due to religion. It wasn't something like normal for worldwide capture in terms of war, or like prisoners of war, or some kind of cultural norm. This is just some diabolical, how should I say, one-sided, egregious, evil thing to do to one group of people. You know what I'm saying? And I really want people to understand that this was deliberately pushed out due to the religious and concept of the curse that was made to Ham. If the curse was not made to Ham, would African people be enslaved the same way? Would they even view them the same way? Because you have the Arabics, right, that reads the Quran, right, that was focused on enslaving these people. Prior to the Quran, with like around, like I said, 400 to 600 AD, right? They didn't. There's no history of them enslaving people like that. There's no history of them focusing on enslaving one specific group of people. So today we're gonna go over some of that, and hopefully I'll be able to bring some more evidence to show that the Bible was, or religion, and yeah, let's just say religion influenced the Pacific slavery, torture, and ridiculous acts done to these people because of religion. All right, I'm gonna do a quick recap. Um, Let me see, put that up there. All right, so quick recap. Um, I start off the chapter one. If you guys want to go back and watch that video, um, religion influence slavery. You guys can go back and watch that video. But to do a recap real quick, so we could catch up to date to see where we're going, is that Ham, which is Noah had three sons, Shem, Japheth, and Ham, right? And Ham laughed at his dad because he was drunk and he saw him naked, passed out. Anyway, Shem and Japheth cover him up, walk backwards and cover him up, and then Noah got word of what Ham did, and he cursed. He cursed Ham because he looked at him naked and laughed, and he cursed him and he said, Ham, your son Canaan, be servants to your brethren. And his brethren is Shem and Japheth. Japheth had a lot of sons, Shem had a lot of sons, and the legend went on. Ham also had a lot of sons, and his legend went on. Now, Ham had other sons besides Canaan. Now, the funny thing is this, because I didn't mention this in the last video. Canaan had Canaan is Ham's son, and then remember Noah cursed Canaan. He didn't say curse Ham's sons, all of them. He said Canaan. Now the question is this: if the Bible was specifically seeking out Canaan's sons, I mean, they would have to geographically locate Canaan's lineage of all his sons. But Ham had other sons as well. So they'll have to differentiate all the other brothers versus Canaan. I think Canaan was the first son. And find out all the lineage of Canaan, all the bloodline lineage towards Canaan's sons. I mean, Canaan's sons. But that's not what happened in Africa, though. Because for millions of years, because as I say, I think it said like 13 years, 1,000 years, or 1,300 years, African was being enslaved by the Arabics all the way back from the 4th century, right? The 400 AD. So, and then when it comes to the 1500s, the transatlantic slave trade started, which was the same concept of what Arabics was doing. Now, how could you differentiate Canaan's sons from all the other brethren that was born by Ham? You couldn't really tell the difference. And as I was saying, the Arabics was enslaving whether you're black or if you look white or if you look like an Arab. Long as you was an Arab, long as you was an African and you had no type of Arabic religion, because I don't think they would enslave their own Arabic people, right? So, long as you're from Africa, most likely you're not Arabic. Whether you look like them or not, they're enslaving you. It's in the context of the religion. So now that we have a quick breakdown to what chapter 1 was, I mean, the first part of this video was in terms of religion influenced by the Bible, right? The curse of Ham, Canaan son. The son of Canaan. I mean, because of Ham, sons Canaan. All right, let's move forward. So, what we're gonna do now, we already went through the Bible and showing how his sons, because how much sons they had. Cause Canaan by himself had like almost 13 sons. He had a lot of kids. He had a lot of boys. So all his boys went into slavery, every single one of them. Right? Based on this group of people. Now, what I want to do is, I want to finish, let me go to it. Not that. I want to finish this this letter that was written from King Leopold II, and I'm reading the second part of the letter because I did read the first part, the first page in the video. Most likely the ending of the video. If you guys go check it out, probably fast forward a little bit towards the end, you will see me breaking down the letter in the end. So, in this video, we're going to basically complete the whole thing, which is only 2 more pages. And then we're going to go into a reenaction video to hearing this from, a different author or a documentary showing that how the Arabics was basically enslaving the African people in their time frame, and possibly you guys can put one and two together, and we kind of know the Atlantic child slave already, how that was. So, and you put the way how they was treating the Arab, how the Arabics was treating the black people during them time. But I think when the Caucasians, or as we would say, the colonizers started enslaving African people, I think they doubled down on what the Arabics did. I think what the Arabs did was bad, right? But the 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 colonizers, the Caucasians, right? They did worse. They went hard. They did 10 times worse than what the Arabics was doing. All right, but anyway, so I want to finish this letter that he wrote, that King Leopold wrote to to the colonizers, which was France, Germany, um, the Italians, England, Dutch, all of them, right? Every single one of them, the Spaniards, all of them, right? The Portuguese. So, if I remember correctly, I think I already went over where they were saying that to keep the women docile, or to keep the women submissive, they gotta keep them pregnant. Basically, make sure they're pregnant for 9 months. So every time a woman have a baby, she got to be pregnated. So, and in that, how that worked was, now this is information not from the Arabic side. This is from the Caucasian side, right? This is from the white, the England side, right? What country was it from? I think it's the Dutch, not Dutch, Portuguese. I think it was Portugal. Anyway, so this is the information from the Caucasian side, and King Leopold was telling um, the colonizer, as he said, to colonize missionary. So he's talking to the other colonizers, telling them how to keep the black people submissive, keep them, from gaining any type of will or strength or encouragement to push back or fight back, or even just think about it. So let's just keep going. So anyway, in the first page, he was saying that to keep the women submissive, right, is for them to be pregnant. Basically, he said keep their women in 9 months of submission, which means they have to be pregnant, right? So that way they don't, the women are not strong enough to fight back or have the reason to fight, because they got to protect their children. Force them to pay you in the signs of recognition, right? So let me blow that up a little bit. So he said, force them to pay you in signs of recognition, whether it's goats or chicken, eggs, whatever it is they have, they gotta give some kind of offering. Whenever the white people visit the village, or whenever they come to the village, it's like extortion, right? It's a submissive way of saying you guys have to worship me, okay? And then make sure the earners never become rich, since every day that it is impossible for them to be rich to be rich to enter heaven. Now, why would he use that quote? Because he was used. Remember, like I said, the Bible heavily influenced slavery. They used quotations from the Bible to come recall before they came to the slavery. Let me give y'all a recap on that real quick. You got to remember, before you got the Africans to be enslaved, this is on the west coast, right? Because the Arabs already had the north side. So this is on the west coast, okay? The west coast wasn't too much indulged into the religion. So when the Arabics brought the religion to them, they had to kind of basically sweeten it up for them to believe it. And I would say give them about, I think, if I remember correctly, I think it's about 2 years, 2 to 3 years, or maybe 1.5 to 2 years, they influenced the Africans to believe in Christianity, and that was their God and everything. So once they got indoctrinated, and some of the the Africans was priests and pastors and deacons and all this good stuff. They came up with the slave mentality thing. So a lot of the guys, and then the whole concept, you should not, you should turn the other cheek, and thou should not fling stones, and all these different things. So a lot of the Africans fell under that mindset. Some of them didn't, but a lot of them did. Okay, so this is why he's using quotes from like "Never become rich every day. That is impossible for the rich to be enter kingdom." So that's one of the quotes from the Bible. Make them pay tax each week at Sunday mass. So they're talking about when they go to church, make them pay money, right? Use the money for the poor to build flourish business centers, institute, and confessional systems, which allow you to be detective denouncing any black that has the different consciousness contrary to of what the decision maker. So what they're saying is this is he breaking it down is that what they use the money that they went to church with, right? Make the black people, African people, pay commissary to the church, and then the money that they use to the church, they also reverse that into influencing the people in the neighborhood, like the poor people, so that gives them some kind of fellowship, right? But at the same time, like we have experienced this in America, where they will support you, but then they'll create a system in the process of the support to manipulate you, right, and destroy the family or take away your jobs, or do some kind of weird, you know, contradictional power struggle situation where the people will be like, damn, what's going on? So here we say, in the context of them using the church to support the poor, the trick is to build flourish businesses centers. So they're using the money that they're making from the slaves to build centers for themselves, and institute and professional assistance, which allow you to be so and then even though they're using these things to, which could be positive, but they're also using them to manipulate the slaves. So that's why if any slave having any small conversation or they're trying to push back on anything, they're basically keeping the slaves busy from grouping, basically. Teach the end to forget their heroes and to adore ours. So that's another problem right there. Now, let's go back again. Remember, initially, a lot of these Africans was already indoctrinated. The second part to the problem of the indoctrination is a lot of the elder people, the males specifically, but all the women was killed. They would kill them, and they would take on the younger generation, anywhere between, I guess, like 25 and down, and the younger the better, right? And they'll get rid of the mother and the fathers. If the woman submit to them, then they'll probably keep the woman. But most cases they'll kill the males, and they'll probably kill some of the mothers. Just depends on how defensive the mother is. All right, so make sure they don't have no heroes, so they have nobody to motivate them. The only hero is the white people. So that's an important section. Now the reason I'm reading it is because I'm dissecting it, right? He said, teach the elders to forget the heroes and to all adore only yours. Never present a chair to a black come visit you. Do not give him more than a cigarette. Also, too, he said, which would be okay. So basically, what he's saying when he said forget your heroes is another way to saying that. Remember, we're talking about teenagers, children, and we're talking about this is about 400 years. So We're talking about in the beginning it was a war. A lot of people, a lot of the elder males died from fighting the war. The ones that get influenced from the Christianity, they was already influenced, so they're gonna do what they're supposed to do. And then the brainwashing come in where he said, don't let them know they're heroes. Let them adore ours, right? That's the brainwashing. So you're now re-educating a lot of these younger people that they don't have a God, and the only God that they have is the one that they can see, which is the white Jesus. Also, too, it opens the door to some kind of mom and pop situation where white people are gonna look up to black people are gonna look up to white people as some kind of feed me type mentality, like they can't do anything for themselves. That's to me, that's what that did. That's also psychological. Take them out of the self-absorbing mentality where they have to absorb the other person that is feeding them. All right, let's move on. Also, he mentioned about don't give them no more than one cigarette. So this is just another submissive way to break in the slave mindset. So he said when they come visit them or when they come around and they want something from you, you just give them one, right? Don't make them feel like they're equal to you, basically. You only give them what they deserve or what you think they deserve, which is only one cigarette. Never invite them in for dinner. If they give you chicken every time you arrive at your home, at his home. So whenever you visit, when the visitors come to your house, you gotta provide them some kind of offering to show them, you know, their worship or whatever. It's almost like you're worshiping them. Basically, that's what he's doing. He's having African people worship the white people. So, uh, all right. So here we are now. They say about speech which allow you real intention of Christian missionary journey into Africa was exposed to the world by Mr. Muko Makawani Mikiwanini. I can't really pronounce his name. Anyway, Mukwani Bukoko, born in Congo 1915, and who is in 1935 while working with the Congo, brought a second-hand Bible from the Belgian priest for to who forgot the peach. He said peach speech. My bad, my bad. He said he forgot the speech in the Bible. Doctor Dozozi, Shiedozi, Akora. Anyway, in my to break down the text in my understanding, hopefully, because it was a little confusing. He basically saying that this guy named Mr. Mukawani, who was born in the Congo in 1915 to 1935, well, not to 1995. One of the Christian guys from the Vatican Church, right? One of the churches from one of the preachers from Belgium left the one of the real Bibles or one of the originated Bibles without any fabrication to the Bible, and he left it with him, and he started reading it. So he started breaking down the notes and comparing the Bibles together, which is something like kind of what I do. I compare the all the Bibles together and to kind of make sense of it and see why there's a beef between the Bibles or why people fight, like for example over there in Israel and stuff like that. Why? What is this big hook up about the Bible, because to me the Quran and the Christian Bible is the same thing. You just Quran just have a little more detail in it, but they're talking about the same characters of the book, the same God, right? Anyway, let's keep going. So, he found the book. He started reading the book, and he forgot that there was translations in the Bible where he can read it. Now that all the missionary carried out, and still carry out that mandate, we are only lucky to have found King Leopold's articulation articulation of the aim of the Christian imperialist missionary to Africa. So this right here shows that, you know how the Christianity imperialist missionary to Africa. They literally had this letter from King Leopold using Christianity to conquer Africa. Basically, that's what he's saying. Even the African convert to today managed to, even the Africans converts who today manage the elder churches in Africa. So he basically saying Africans that became Christianity, the Africans manage the churches in Africa still to this day. The priests, bishops, archbishops, cardinals, etc., etc. So in all the branches, they had black African people running through these churches, etc. Of the Romans and the Protestant sects, and especially also those who evangelize born again Christians still serve the same mandate, which is why they demonize Africa gods and angelize African name and drop the name of the African deities which from part of African names, and still attack and demolish the African shrines that have managed to survive. Okija, right? So he basically saying that even though the Africans that became Christian, right, and bishop, whatever they became, they saw what was happening in terms of Africa being put in slave. They're destroying all their deities. They're dismantling their African gods, which is insulting. But the Africans are so stuck into this mentality, or it could have been fear, that they refused to push back or fight against the situation. Now, some did. I'm not saying some, you could say half, you could say 60%, you could say 40%. But the bottom line is some Africans did push back, some Africans did reject the Christian beliefs and went into war, but not all of them did. And they end up had to fight. Like some village even it became enemy because one side is Christian and the other side is not. And it became a beef between the village, right? So basically, if y'all put it in a nutshell, that's like you have a son. I'm using an analogy. That's like if you have children and your children go to school, but the teachers in the school are influencing your kids to live a certain way, talk a certain way, believe in certain things, whatever it is, different from your household. You're not gonna agree with that. It's not gonna be a fair processing for you to inherit to take in. You know what I'm saying? So you're probably most likely gonna move your kid out to that school. So this is what happened to the African people. It wasn't something like they just came over there and said, "Hey, let's do this." No, that's not what it is. They came with a smile on their faces. They was doing trade, and as they was doing trade, like I said, the first 2 to 3 years, I would say maybe a couple hundred years, they were just trading. That's all they was doing. And then the whole Christian thing came into play, and that's when everything changed. and they start demolishing the children, because the goal is to get rid of men, get rid of the men, so you can control the woman and the children, and that's what happens. And like I said back again, that's he did had wars. It's not like once they realized what was going on, there was some war broke out, okay, between the Africans and the colonizers. The problem is they don't want to say how much colonizer died during the slave war or the conquering of Africa. They don't want to tell you how much, African died. I mean, African, how many Caucasians died during them war sessions. Okay. So after they come trying to convert them to Christianity, and they couldn't defend most of the black, a good bit of Africans was already turned Christian. So once it became what standstill with both, somebody gonna have to make decisions. Now this is where we're going into into Japanese country, because as you know, the white people try to do the same thing to the Japanese. So let's go. It's about the Japanese counterpart probably did discern the game. I mean, this current discern the game, meaning that the Japanese kind of saw, well, they kind of peep it. Well, yeah, wait, hold on. Why these people getting beat up and killed and trash when y'all talking about living Christianity life and all this good stuff? So that's what the Japanese was doing. They was like, what's going on? Why is y'all attacking, the African people? Even went to access the vision of Leopold later, but even if the Japanese shogun did not institute what Leopold makes explicit, they clearly realized that the danger of Japanese convert to Christianity could cause some problems within the society. Right? That's where they can clearly realize the danger in the Japanese convert Christianity farming and the fifth column. Right, so yeah, I just wanted to catch up on that a little bit. All right, so we're gonna go into the next column. So in the fifth column, the loyal to their religion in Europe to rid Japan of that danger. And in the late 16th century, the shogun began their exploration of Portugal and Spaniard missionary on the ground that they were forcing Japanese to become Christian, teaching this disciples to weak temple take and trade slaves. Then in 1596, it became clear to the Japanese authorizing that Christianity had been popular to the Spanish conquest of other lands. So basically what happened is that, to make a quick, to break it down a little bit for you guys, the Japanese kind of peeped game what the Christianity was doing. But by the time the shogun realized that what was happening, a good number of the Japanese already became Christian, right? And then the Spaniards and all these people started, you know, basically holding ground in Japan, and basically kind of just making decisions and stuff. And there was like kind of causing some disruption in the community, because there was like, for some reason when people became Christian, they just act different, right? So it was quickly drawn to them that the fifth column, a loyalty to Rome and the control by the priests of the foreign religion, was clear that the present danger to the sovereignty of the newly unfilled Japan. Soon after, the persecution the persecution and the suspicion of Japanese Christianity began early in the 17th century, sensing the danger from the creed that taught obedience to the foreign priests rather than the Japanese authority. So yeah, all the missionaries were ordered to leave, and all the Japanese were ordered to register at the Buddhist temple. When the Japanese took took part into the rebellion, the foreign priests were executed, and the Spanish were expelled, and the Japanese Christians were forbidden to travel abroad. So to break this down real quick is that um, what the shogun did was he realized that what the Christian was doing, so he now put a stop to it. And when he was trying to put a stop to it, the Christian was the Christians was basically trying to influence the Japanese to worship different gods versus the gods that they had already owned, already know. And that was to the shogun, that was not that's not how that works. So went to the word. Right. So they tried this. The things got a little messy, and the shogun decided he want to put a stop to that type of thing because he gonna cause problems. Now, yeah, and then he, like you said, he stopped them from traveling abroad, so the Japanese couldn't go abroad, and he stopped the Christians and stuff from coming in. After a number of rebellion, so like I said, they had some beef, right? So it was shogun against religion, people, right? After a few rebellions, largely by the Christian, was put down. The Japanese and Christian were suppressed, and their descendants were put under the class state surveillance for countries that thereafter. In the 1640s, all the Japanese suspects of being Christian were used roughly exterminated. Thus, did the Japanese by the 1650s to save itself from the first European attempt to men to mentally observe, conquer, and colonize it. So he put a stop to the whole concept of them conquering Japan, or basically turning Japan into basically a U.S. country, or let's not say U.S. country, but a Christian country or Portuguese country or wherever country it was going to be at that time. It could have been, Rome, which is like um, Greece, not Greece, like French and the Dutch and Belgium. Right at that time. So he put a stop to it. He put a stop to the whole thing, and he exterminated a lot of Japanese, from converting to Christianity. Basically, he killed them. So a lot of Japanese, they were saying also that there was a sign saying that when the Christianity was trying to be forced into the Japanese, they was committing suicide, which is some of it was true, but that's just on the samurai side of it, right? But the other side of it, where most of the locals, of course, they're not going to do that, but they was getting killed by the numbers. Now let's compare that to the Africans. When the colonizers came to Africa with Christianity, they did not see the destruction of them exercising what they was, but they could have learned from the Muslims, I guess, because the Muslim was enslaving people, but they wasn't doing it technically the same way that the colonizers was doing it. It was a little more rough and dangerous, right? They was basically burning them and stuff like that. Um, if the African could have pushed back and fought against, the induction of the Christian faith or whatever, they probably would have did the same thing. That get rid of the ones who don't want to fall in line and focus on the ones who do. So I think that's if only if the let's just it coulda, woulda, shoulda, but that's not how the story went. But I really kind of think back sometimes and be like, I know Africans did fight for their freedom, but what I'm saying is sometimes I wonder, like, maybe they just didn't fight hard enough, you know? But anyway, after a captive who was taken to abroad, he was slaving the Africans at home were Leopold having already soon be forbidden. So they had already forcibly deprived of their authority. We're in no capital position of resist Christianization. Thus, the Christianity is still practiced in all of the America despot, just as that in the African homeland since the start of the 20th century. Damn, the 20th century. So you're basically just saying that slavery and how the Africans was even indoctrinated, and when they come to America, it's like it's a different. Well, they try to implement a lot of those things into the black people after slavery here in America, and try to keep that pressure on top of them. So outside of America, it'll look different versus the people who was here. You know what I'm saying? Are we gonna end it there? So I don't really think I got to do the rest of this. So the rest of this is just basically talking about, how people need to acknowledge themselves, and how King Leopold was basically trying to. The same thing I said before. It's almost like you're recapping from reading the letter and just basically breaking down the sections so you guys to understand the fear and the weakness that black people have towards. We gotta wake up our mentality away from those fears. All right, let's go into the video. All right, this is gonna break down what basically everything that we went over, and what this guy is gonna do. He's gonna narrate basically some of the stuff that I went over, but he's now speaking on the Arabic side of the slave trade versus the Caucasian side of slave trade, because the Caucasian learned it from the Arabics, right? Um, with that said, let's watch it.
Transatlantic slave trade often come to mind. But there's another lesser-known chapter in the history of human suffering, a trade that spanned over a millennium, reaching deep into Africa, the Middle East, and beyond. This is the story of the Arab slave trade, a trade that shaped cultures, economies, and histories in ways we are still uncovering today. The Arab slave trade began long before the European powers set sail to Africa. As early as the 7th century, following the rise of Islam, Arab merchants began to establish extensive trading networks across the Indian Ocean, the Red Sea, and the Sahara Desert. The Arab slave trade operated for over 1,300 years. Historians estimate that between 10 to 18 million Africans were taken from their homelands and sold into slavery through this vast network. Unlike the transatlantic slave trade, which primarily sent slaves to the Americas, the Arab slave trade dispersed enslaved people across North Africa, the Middle East, Persia, India, and parts of Europe. Black Africans, Turks, Iranians, Europeans, and Berbers were among the people traded by the Arabs, with the trade being practiced.
All right, so far, basically, he's just breaking down the Arab slave trade and comparing it to the the Atlantic slave trade and the Saharan slave trade. So they're basically saying that they like I said, the slave trade from the Western slave trade, the Atlantic slave trade was way more graphical and advanced and more gruesome and dangerous than the Arab slave trade. The Arab slave trade had slaves, yes, but they had at some point some of these slaves they wasn't getting the treatment that the African was actually experiencing.
Throughout the Arab world, primarily in Western Asia, North Africa, East Africa, and Europe. The main examples of Arabic slave trades are Al-Andalus slave trade between the 8th and the 15th century. Barbary slave trade between the early 16th and the early 19th century. Trans-Saharan slave trade between the mid-7th century and the 20th century. Indian Ocean slave trade between the antiquity and the early 20th century. Ottoman slave trade between the 13th and the early 20th century. Red Sea slave trade between the antiquity and the mid-20th century. Libyan slave trade started in the 7th century, ongoing. Today we will be focusing on the trans-Saharan slave trade. During the trans-Saharan slave trade, slaves were mainly transported across the Sahara Desert. Most were moved from sub-Saharan Africa to North Africa to be sold to Mediterranean and Middle Eastern civilizations. Estimates of the total number of black slaves moved from sub-Saharan Africa to the Arab world range from 6 to 10 million. The trans-Saharan trade routes conveyed a significant number of this total, with one estimate tallying around 7.2 million slaves crossing the Sahara from the mid-7th century until the 20th century, when it was abolished. According to Professor Ibrahima Baba Kake, there were 4 main slavery routes to North Africa: from east to west of Africa, from the Maghreb to the Sudan, from Tripolitania to central Sudan, and from Egypt to the Middle East. The Arabs managed and operated the trans-Saharan slave trade, although Berbers were also actively involved. Early trans-Saharan slave trade. Records of slave trading and transportation in the Sahara.
All right, so there you have it. I'm not gonna play the whole video. I just want you guys to see a little bit to kind of like get a graphic of what the slave trade was like. Um, for the Arabic side of the table, the Sahara side of the table, and like I said, it was bad, but it was not. To me, the harshest slave treatment they had to do is when they had to travel through the Sahara Desert on foot, basically, and I mean with shackles or whatever, dying of thirst. To me, I think that was the worst. But once they become to the neighborhood or the clans, some of these guys was put to work, of course, but initially a lot of them end up being in love with some of the daughters or whatever the case is, and they become part of the family. Now, or that of course, sometimes they might get killed, but the bottom line is they had an opportunity to stretch that far. For the African slave trade, I mean, for the Atlantic slave trade, it was a little more difficult than that. They wasn't allow those things to happen, right? They wasn't allowing those things to happen. They didn't want to. They didn't want to see. Yeah, they didn't want to see black people and white people get along. They didn't want to see them do nothing other than what they was taught to do, right? Uneducated, unintelligent, everything above. And, they would do anything to keep the mentality of those people the way it is. But anyhow, the point to it is that the Bible played a role to all the slaves. The slavery that was going on, and he also influenced other parts of the world. Even though he kind of focused on Africa and the Middle East and more than anything else, India, it was it wasn't practiced the same the way Atlantic slave is. I'm not trying to do a come up or try to. I'm just saying that the gruesomeness of it, because they didn't see black people. The Arabics are just more of the biblical point of view, right? But to me, the colonizers was more on like they're not human type of view. That's how I viewed it, cause that's how they was coming. They even put up a wall so they don't have to get out, so they can pretty much drown or just don't be there when the tide come in. But anyhow, with that said, that's enough for today. Like, subscribe, let me guys know how you like the video. I'm gonna leave the link in the the description box for the slave trade, so y'all can finish watching the whole video. And let me guys know how you feel about this, man. And peace out.